Welcome to Generating Gratitude, a look at personal growth in a grateful life. What follows is not professional advice or medical recommendation, but stories and perspectives about living with gratitude. Now, here is your host, Joe Volk.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another blazing edition of Generating Gratitude here on WSGW. Again, grateful for our folks at Connoisseur Media that allow us to bring the gratitude to you every week. And, of course, we start out every show with the Joe mantra: you can't be hateful and you can't be grateful at the same time. And I believe that. And, boy, I tell you what, we need gratitude more than ever. And I'm grateful for my first guests today, Dan and Jennifer. Unique story. Dan and Jennifer, they have a website, A Couple Takes on MS. They're a married couple, and both have MS. Dan, Jennifer, welcome to Generating Gratitude.
Thanks so much, Joe. It's good to be here. Thanks for having us.
Dan,
Yes,
if you could please, Dan, give us a little bit about your story. Then we'll get Jennifer, and we'll have Jennifer tell us a little bit about her story too.
Yeah, my story, as far as my story, like with multiple sclerosis, I actually was diagnosed on Valentine's Day of 2000. And so I think, leading up to that, I'd had just numbness in my chest and my feet and everything. And just one thing led to another. And I got tested and, went through a procedure of tests. And, it was like led to the diagnosis. And I think that was the interesting thing is, I had just started, when I first had indications that I had MS, I actually was working in Saginaw, and I had gotten a job here at CMU. And so basically I started at CMU on January 3rd of 2000 and then was diagnosed on Valentine's Day, like a month and a half later. And so that was a lot. But that, one thing, I think that's kind of where I was with my MS.
Now, Dan, what's that like when the doctor comes in and drops that bomb on you?
It's something where I actually, because I lived in Elma at the time, and so it was a phone call that I got from Dr. Holmes. I was in my office in Saginaw, and, and I had all these tests and stuff. And when he called, he says, he says, well, the good thing, and he's a great doctor, but he says, the good news is you've got a lot of good brain. But bad news, and he said at that point, because, they do the stuff to look at the plaques in your brain, your central nervous system and everything. And honest God, Joe, it's like, I'm a happy guy. And so I'm just like, oh, okay, blah, blah, blah. And so I'm just talking with him. And then, it said the radiology report said the causes of my numbness and symptoms was most likely multiple sclerosis. And I'm like, okay, that's fine. Well, we'll do this. But honest God, Joe, it was just like at that point when I hung up the phone, it just dawned on me. It's like, this isn't like a cold. This is going to be something that I'm carrying with me for the rest of my life. And I think for the next probably 45 minutes, I just sat in my office and sobbed because you're just like, I don't know what this means. What does this look like? So yeah, when the bomb dropped, it was just like, oh my gosh. But then, then when I formally diagnosed, got the actual diagnosis from a neurologist, it was almost like a relief. It was just like, okay, we know what the issue is. Now we can start treating it.
How difficult was it, Dan, to not fill in the blanks? And by filling in the blanks is instead of living one day at a time and here's the information that we know now. It's natural, at least for me anyway, or for most humans, to project into the future and fill in the blanks, and that usually when we fill in the blanks, that's almost always negative. Did you do any of that right away?
I think you reading up, because I didn't know that much about MS, and so it's like you start reading into it and you start projecting. And I think you always, like with something like that, when you're saying a chronic progressive disease, you start thinking worst case scenarios and like, what can you do? And I think at that point it gave me, I guess, motivation to really to be more proactive, I guess, to just make sure that, do what I could. So, I mean, you fill in the blanks of like, the worst case, but it's like, well, what can I do to, I guess, position myself better so that doesn't happen, or at least do what I can? Because, I mean, you have no control over what the disease does. So
right.
I think that's kind of where I was like filling in the blanks, hoping that I could fill it in with more positive things.
Let's bring Jennifer in. Jennifer, when did you just get your diagnosis?
Well, it was 8 days after my 23rd birthday. So I was diagnosed in 1997. I know, spoiler, I gave away. I'm an old lady now, or an older lady. Yeah, so I was 23 and I was blindsided. I had no idea that what multiple sclerosis was or anything. So I was just, a young 23-year-old do, and then I get diagnosed with a chronic illness. Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. You're 23. That's the last thing that you're expecting.
Yes, absolutely. And you're thinking maybe you're going to the doctor because you have a cold or you pulled a muscle or something, and they're like, no, it's a chronic illness that you're going to have for the rest of your life. So like I said, Joe, I was completely blindsided.
Now, did you fill in the blanks?
Yes. This again, I'm dating myself, but at the time, Annette Funicello, who also lived with multiple sclerosis, she was the only person, I didn't know her, obviously, but I knew of her, and she was using a wheelchair. And so I thought, oh, that's going to be my future. Not that I was going into it with a negative mindset. I had a wonderful family. I have a wonderful family of wonderful friends. And I thought, I can do this, but I was worried about the wheelchair. And now, all these years later, I am a wheelchair user. I do not walk anymore, but I have a fantastic life. And I think just not letting the disease, it's a huge part of me, but not letting it overshadow me. I try, Dan, and I try and live in spite of or despite the disease. We try and keep moving forward. And so I filled in the blank.
When somebody gets a diagnosis like this, Jennifer, the natural impulse is to be scared. When did you stop being scared, and when did you kind of aggressively, like, screw it, I'm going to do the best I can. I'm going to live one day at a time. Here's the way I'm going to go at it now. That's kind of a process, isn't it?
I think it's still a process. I mean, that's a really good question. It was now, all these years later, there's so much more information about the disease and people that are diagnosed. There's so much more that you can do to take advantage and to take care of your health. But when we were diagnosed, both Dan and I, they didn't know as much. So I think it was easy to say, screw it. Let's just take care. Let's live in the now. I told my mom, I remember telling her, I have an open window, and I have a window, and maybe MS will close it, but I want to do as much as I can while the window is open. And so I was just guns blazing. Let's do this. Let's live to the best of our ability before the disease catches up to me.
And you're listening to Generating Gratitude here with WSGW with Jennifer and Dan. We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we'll talk more about their journey and, of course, their platform, Couple Takes on MS. It's a fascinating story, and these folks are amazingly courageous. You're listening to Generating Gratitude here on WSGW. Welcome back to Generating Gratitude here on WSGW. I'm Joe, your host. Dan and Jennifer are their platform, their website, A Couple Takes on MS. Both MS patients. Now, Dan, I'm going to run back to you. When did the fear ever go away and you just said, screw it, I'm just going to live one day at a time and I'm going to do the best I can? Or is there still a little bit of that in the back of your mind?
I think it's always in the back of your mind. You know, I don't know if, like, when I was a little kid and you did something bad and you don't want your parents to know, and then when you start having a good day and think you're doing well, and you think, oh yeah, in the back of your mind, it's just like, oh, mom and dad are going to find out I did this. And I think, you live positive, but it's just kind of that lingering thing in the back of your head that it's just like, it's almost like, I always joke, like, now I'm aging myself, but like, Fred Sanford, just any kind of new symptom that comes up, you're just thinking, okay, this is it. I've escaped this for 26 years and nothing really bad has happened with the MS, but it's just like the big one's coming. It's just like, this is finally catching up to me. I think that's where the whole, screw it. It's like we do what we can. And so but there's always that fear. And like Jennifer said, how long will my window be open? I think just as the challenge we have now is just like, there's lots of things that go away as you age. And so then there's always that deciphering between, is this an MS thing or is this an age thing? Is this we stayed out too late last night thing? I think it's just there's a lot that plays into it. But I think there's always that fear, but you can't live your life in the fear.
It's interesting you bring that up. I was just recently in the hospital for a little heart stuff, and it's amazing how your mind can play tricks. Like every twinge, every pain, okay, is this, what's this? Wait, I've never felt this before. Oh my goodness. What? That tendency to overanalyze everything.
Oh, you do. I mean, Joe, seriously, it's like, I had been at CMU for I diagnosed in February, but then it's like any time I had a cold set in, it irritated or exaggerated any MS symptom I had, but it's just like I didn't know that at that time. And so you just really had to grow into it to know your disease, that it's like, my disease isn't getting worse. It's just being amplified because of other things in my body. I know, like right now, some 26 years later, if I get a fever, everything, it's like my body shuts down. And so, then I can't walk and have a hard time walking. It's like, not because of my MS necessarily, but it's because the amplification in your body. But yeah, it's just, anytime you have that cold, that cough, that wheezing, that pain in your elbow, it's just like, oh my God, this is it. This is happening.
Jennifer, I'm going to throw her on back to you. Jennifer, how do you, both, it's interesting that you and Dan are both suffering from the same thing. How do you lean on each other? I would imagine that support of each other is critical, because when one of you is down, the other has to be up. But because there's a tendency that if you both get down, you can both get on that damn pity potty, and that's not good for anybody.
No, we are the envy of some of our friends, and I say envy with like a little smile, because I have a built-in support system. I have a built-in support group. I have a spouse that when I say, oh, my hands and feet feel a little numb today, he knows exactly what I'm talking about. Or if he says something about, oh, I'm so tired and my fatigue is really high, I understand that because the disease is in my body as well. So that, it's a bad thing to have in common, but it's helpful that we can get each other a little bit better. And, we met and we each were living with the disease when we met each other. So we knew that we were going to progress together and that the disease was something we were both living with and we're going to have a future, that we had to make a marriage work in spite of the disease, and we had to lean on each other. And, we're yin and yang too, Joe. Some days Dan will be in like that pity party sort of mood, and I'll be like boosting him up. Whereas when I'm in that woe is me sort of mind frame, he's like, no, Jennifer, don't be like that. Think about the things that you have that are still working. And more often than not, Dan's a slightly more positive person than I am. But, thank God he helps me reframe and think about the things that I still haven't to be grateful for.
Brings up a great point, Jennifer. At any time, were you mad at God? Why me? Why me?
Why me? But then, yes, and sometimes still I'm like that, if I wake up and I can't do something, I'm like, God, why me? But, Dan and I have often had the conversation, well, why not you? What makes you so special that you don't get a chronic illness or you don't get a flat tire on your way to work? God's here to help you deal with it, and and thank God that I found Dan and vice versa, that we have each other to lean on. But I was 5 years after my diagnosis? No, 8 years after my diagnosis. Sorry, Joe, I had to do math. I met Dan and we got married. So yes, why me did I have to get this disease? But thank you, God, that you gave me somebody to help deal with it and be a partner.
That's an amazing way to look at it, Jennifer. That's incredible. Dan, how about yourself? Did you ever have that, okay, why me, God moment?
Yeah, every day. I think, but I think that, when I was first diagnosed, and it's just like, you have the conversations, and you yell at God, you swear at God, you just like, because it's like, and that's fair to do. Our pastor is just like, God can handle it if you swear at him. But it was like, I never really necessarily asked why me, God, because I'm just like, okay, there, because then of course you have this like this guilt of saying, oh, I was diagnosed because I did this when I was in high school, kind of thing. It's just like, this is your penance, dude. So
yeah.
I think that, it was more so not the why me, God, but it's more, okay, help me. It's like, how can I get through this? How are you going to help me? If this is what I'm to do, if this is how I'm needing to live, help me. And I think that's where then you see all of the other people. I think that's the big thing with living with a disease, living with any kind of challenge like that. It's like just knowing that you don't have to do it on, you shouldn't do it on your own. And so it's just like, so I'm saying, help me. And so that's where you look at all the people that come into your life to help you get through it. And, and I think that's then the blessing of, then meeting Jennifer and, and we still, we're sounding all rosy and Pollyanna and that stuff. But I mean, it's still.
We still have our grouchy, angry at the world days where, oh my God, this is just a pain in everything.
Yeah, but it's just like it's this that finding that, and I think that's probably the finding the gratitude is just like just seeing the people that are brought into your life to help you get through it. And so it's just like, because as much as I want to say there's a big S on my chest for being Superman, it's just like I think that's where you have to realize that you're not Superman. You can't do it by yourself.
Right, and everybody has their good days and their bad days. Nobody's Gandhi like where, oh, I accept this and this is, yeah. Sometimes you just want to give it all the middle finger. That's just naturally human nature. We're going to take another short break. Dan and Jennifer with us. Great story, both MS patients. We're going to talk a little bit more about A Couple Takes on MS, their platform for basically chronicling what they're going through. The good, the bad. Great story. Having a great show. You're listening to Generating Gratitude here on WSGW. We'll be right back.
Now it's time for more great moments in gratitude with your host, Joe Volk.
Welcome back to Generating Gratitude here on WSGW. Joe, your host, having a conversation with Jennifer and Dan. Both MS patients. We've had a fascinating conversation about acceptance. And I'm going to go back to you, Jennifer, about acceptance. Now, Jennifer, you're exclusively using a wheelchair now?
Yes. I have not walked in, my goodness, over 20 years.
How difficult was that to accept?
I think it's difficult every single day. Just to be honest, everything takes. I always kid that on my tombstone it's going to say, sorry, I'm late, because everything about a wheelchair, you have to add so much more time. Just to do everything takes more time. But as far as becoming exclusively like a wheelchair user, it was a process, Joe. I walked with a cane, I walked with a walker. I slowly worsened, when Dan and I met, not to give you too much information, but I would be able to go into the bathroom and use the bathroom by myself. I was able to make that transfer. But then, a few years after we married, I lost that strength, that strength to transfer myself. So as it slowly worsened, I learned to accept and adjust and adapt to that change. It wasn't like a boom overnight. I was a wheelchair user. It was just the progression of the disease. So that has been, I suppose, a good thing that I had time.
And Jennifer, when I work with, I'm a 40-year recovering alcoholic, and when I talk to a lot of alcoholics, talk to a lot of drug addicts and people that have beaten it. And the most one of the most important things of recovery and one of the most important things in life is having the humility to ask for help. Because we all need help. Nobody does this all by themselves. Having that humility, that, at least for me anyway, that gives me another dimension in my life. And it's kind of refreshing for me to know that I don't have to do this by myself. I can have that humility to say, hey, folks, I need some help here. And also it gives me the humility to know that other folks need help and I can help them. How does that humility work in your life?
I have to ask for help all of the time, and I'm so grateful and appreciative for my family, for Dan, for my caregiver, Jed, for my caregivers over the 20 years of our marriage that have come in to help me. So that humility is, I appreciate all the help. I appreciate the men and women in grocery stores that help me get items off shelves I can't reach. But at the same time, Joe, I'm a snotty little 5-year-old where I'm like, I can do it by myself. There are times, Dan and I went out to breakfast yesterday, and I was able, to cut my own breakfast. And I did not have to ask for help the entire time. And I was very proud about that. So I can ask for help, but at the same time, when I can do it on my own, I will make sure that no, I can do that and get in that little 5-year-old. Look what I can do. And so I think the humility is kind of back and forth for me. I don't know about Dan. As a man, I think it's a little more difficult for him to ask for help, not to... Yeah, I don't know.
We'll bring Dan into this because not to have Jennifer monopolize all the conversation. Dan, how does that humility work? How was it difficult for you to get that humility? To ask for help. I know in my life sometimes asking for help is damn difficult. But how did it come about for you?
It's still difficult. I think that's where I think I don't know if it's stubbornness. Because Jennifer will say I don't ask for help. It's like, yesterday we went to a friend's house and we have there's a portable ramp to help Jennifer, get up onto their deck. And it's just that's my thing. I should be able to do that and stuff. And it was really hard for me to step back and let somebody else do it. Cause it's just as time goes on, I'm not as strong as I was. And so to let that go. And I think on some levels, there's a lot of acceptance. I think there's recognizing things that I just plain can't do. And so, those are easy to let go of. But it's things that I should be able to do that, and that's where there's some, gratitude is out the window, and I'm angry, and the number of, just nothing is better than, when you need that well-placed F-bomb, it's
yep.
that it's so as far as humility, it's just I'm still struggling with that on things that I can do, should be able to do, and maybe the lack of acceptance that those are things that I just can't do. I used to, with Jennifer, I used to run, but it's just my left side weak, and I was falling one too many times when I'd be out for a run. And then I think when there's those moments that you fall one too many times that you realize you need to stop and it's okay to let this one go. And so I think that's where, so it's letting things go and just knowing when the time is right. And sometimes you need to make sure that it's, because you don't want to let things go because you don't want to make a habit of it. And so I think it's the humility, but at the same time, when I was first diagnosed, when people wanted to help, you need to realize that you need to give them that kind of latitude to let them help, because you would do the same thing for them. And I think that's where the acceptance comes, is knowing that you're not a charity case because you're getting the help, and knowing that if somebody helps me do this, that just means I'll have the energy to do something more the rest of the day. So I think it's just looking at the long game to see when you need to let go. So I think as far as humility, I'm getting used to it, because I used to always be able to do everything, but now it's just starting to get harder. But again, that goes back to, is it the MS? Is it age? Is it,
Yeah, you bring up a great point with age. I find myself getting as I get older, and not being able to do some of the things that I could do when I was younger, and just even reaching the point where I don't want to do those things anymore. Now, instead of lifting stuff, I look for the young guys in the room now. Where are the young backs and the young legs? Where are those guys? I don't have to do that anymore. Jennifer,
but, think though when. Oh, go ahead.
Nope, go ahead, Dan.
Well, I was just going to say, it's just like, but that's just remembering, thinking back to when you were the younger guy and you did do the stuff for the older people to do it. So it's almost like, it's a give and take. And that's, I suppose, probably just, I don't want to go all like Elton John and say circle of life, but I mean,
right.
It's just like, just how that is, so.
Right. It's a skill, I think, that needs practice, is allowing, knowing your limitations and allowing people to help you, and gracefully and humbly accepting that help. And I think that's a skill, because it's also like a gift, because if you have that gift and you give it to somebody, in a weird way, you make somebody else feel better because they're helping you. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Definitely, yes.
All right, you're listening to Generating Gratitude here on WSGW. We've got one more segment left to go on the show, and when we get back from this commercial break, I want to talk to both Dan and Jennifer about A Couple Takes on MS, their platform, their podcasts, their blogs, the speaking engagements that they do, because they're an amazing inspiration to all of us. Talk about anti-self-pity, talk about anti-resentment. These folks are it. And you're listening to Generating Gratitude here on WSGW. Welcome back to Generating Gratitude here on WSGW. Final segment of the show with Jennifer and Dan, MS patients, and your platform, A Couple Takes on MS, because as we mentioned earlier in the interview, both of you have MS. What explain to us your podcast, website, speaking engagements. What do you have out there, Dan?
It's on our website. I think that, that all started back shortly after we got married, where I had a coworker that really encouraged us to start a blog, because she's like, I write for a living. So she's like, you guys could write about this. And so I think it was really just, I always think back to when I was diagnosed in, 2000, just wanting to have like a positive voice. I didn't want to have, the sugarcoating everything and make it sound like this is easy. But I wanted to show, that life doesn't end with an MS diagnosis. And so tackle that through the writing. And so I started writing, and Jennifer, she's an incredible writer, so I made her a writer as well. But then we just started doing the writing, and just to show examples of people that don't stop, but dealing with the realities how do you manage it? And so then I think, once the writing started, then the public speaking, so we're able to go and speak and share our story in different places. And then it was like, then the podcast came about, and we're just like, well, yeah, we could do a podcast, because it's a lot easier to talk than it is to write. So it just everything kind of morphed into that. And so I think it is just having that positive voice, or I guess a realistic voice, because I don't want to sound like, make it sound like, what's the word, being all like, so positive. It's just like, no, it's real.
Yeah, I call it Disney. making it all Disney, where it's great and this is great. And Jennifer, one of the great things about your platform is, like Dan mentioned, the realism, because I think it's important that people talk about the good stuff, but also talk about the things that suck, because that's important too.
I think we have this disease and we have this voice. I was talking with someone last week that my body may physically be weak, but my mind and my voice, but they're not weak. So we have this platform that we use to share our stories, but we also connect with people. We make crazy connections with legislators here at the state level, at the national, the federal level. My goodness, Joe, we're grateful to make a connection with you, to share our story, and to hopefully tell other people, if you get a diagnosis of MS or another chronic illness, to reach out, to don't keep it all to yourself. So, I think that yes, we have really down days and we can be very angry, but then, try and channel that into something positive. Because, like you said, I was so moved by that. You have 365 days left of your life, which is not what you have when you're diagnosed with MS or anything like that. But just to make an impact with the time you have left, or with your life, just to, to do something to keep moving forward. That's what Dan and I always say, whatever that movement looks like, as long as it's going forward.
And I think what you're doing is great, because role models, people need role models. I just recently lost a friend, and she had cancer, and she was doing a blog, and she helped a lot of people, talk about the good and the not so good, like dealing with losing all your hair, which is, a kind of a traumatic thing. And what you folks do with your product creation, with your website, with your blogs, with your speaking engagements is you create that commonality that people can relate to. And I think that it's so important to relate rather than differentiate. Does that make any sense?
That makes perfect sense. I think that's just where, where you want to show that things, because you're not there to pontificate or be, toxic positivity. It's like, this is what we're dealing with. This is how we got out, or just to be more like examples of things. I'm not here to say, I'm not a life coach. I'm not giving life advice, but it's just like, just to see, how is this person navigating through this? And I think that's what's so powerful about what you do with this show. It's like, people are dealing with some rough things, and it's just like, so how do you get out of it? And so that's just, I think that's what really is just like, just living our life. But it's like, well, this is what we do and how we live our life. And I don't want to let the disease take over my life. It's like, I'm taking the disease over myself.
We've got a few minutes left on the show, and I'll ask both of you the same question. In a way, your diagnosis puts it makes mortality more of the forefront. Are you grateful now because you know what's coming? Do you get more enjoyment out of each day? Like, you know that the clock is running, so the one day at a time now is important. You know, living the best I can today is important. Living with gratitude is important. And how does that gratitude, Jennifer, like in your life, how do you maintain that?
I try not to focus on the little things. The little things can fall to the side because in the end, it's the relationships, it's the moments, it's, you know, you want to cherish what you have. I don't walk anymore, but I can still, I can still use my arms, and maybe someday I may not have as much strength in my arms. So I'm grateful that I can do it. I'm grateful that I can cut up my own food. As silly as that sounds, I wasn't able to do that for a while. So you have to embrace what you can do, and I try not to focus on what I can't do. I try and look at what I can do and be grateful that I can, and that I have my family and friends around me. And there's nearly 1 million Americans living with multiple sclerosis. So I like to say to anyone who's first diagnosed, you can find someone in this world to talk about what you're going through.
Now, Dan, you've got 30 seconds to describe your gratitude, Dan. Sorry about that.
My gratitude. Oh, no, you're good. My gratitude is just like, I'm grateful for what I have and what I can do. I think that's, I just want to be there for other people. As I said, that I'm able to do this and that I can do, because I never complain about my disease because there are so many other people out there with the disease that would kill to have my troubles. So it's just like, I just have to, be grateful for it and do well by it, because you never know when it's going to be gone.
And real quick, Dan, how can people get a hold of you?
I think get a hold of us through our website is acoupletakesonms.com. We also have handles on Facebook and Instagram, but I think that start and email us at acoupletakesonms@gmail.com if you have any questions or if there's anything we can do to help you.
All right, Dan, Jennifer, thank you. Thank you very much. Very grateful that you joined me today. Your story is a powerful story and should be a lesson to all of us. Be grateful. Because you can be grateful no matter what your situation in life. It's your choice. It's totally up to you. Said it 1,000,000 times, and I'll say it 1,000,000 more. Can't be hateful, and you can't be grateful at the same time. Grateful's a hell of a lot more fun. And with that, you're listening to Generating Gratitude here on WSTW. We'll see you again next week.